as I said at the beginning of Mass, this is a strange experience. This is especially strange for two reasons. Number one, I'm preaching to an empty church. Number two, Father Rob was supposed to be preaching. And obviously, I'm not Father Rob. And the reason for this strangeness, both dimensions of strangeness, is the same thing. The reason is COVID-19. We are in an empty church because we are accepting the limitations asked of us by our civic leaders to essentially do an act of kindness, ultimately an act of love, to do all that we can to minimize the spread of this dreadful virus, especially for the sake of those most vulnerable. And so we accept this. That's why we have an empty church. And the reason why Father Rob isn't preaching is, well, the same reason, because Father Rob, unfortunately, was at one of the exposure sites over the last few days, and we thought it would be better to play it safe until he's already been tested, and he's waiting for the results of that. So we'll keep you posted on that. So I found this out last night, and as I wasn't planning to prepare a homily, well, this is a bit of a wing job. So there you go. As I said, we must accept certain limitations and suffer through them. Today is Good Shepherd Sunday, the first Sunday of Easter. All over the world, we celebrate what is called Good Shepherd Sunday because we always read from John chapter 10, where Jesus refers to himself as the Good Shepherd. And that's the primary point of today's homily, is that Jesus is the Good Shepherd, and that is the ground of everything that we do in the church. We heard in the gospel today, Jesus say these words, "I am the Good Shepherd. I know my own, and my own know me, just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father. And I lay down my life for the sheep." Jesus asserts three things. Number one, that he is the Good Shepherd. Jesus is good. He's the bonum pastor, as we used to say. He is not against us, he's for us. He wants us to have life. He is trustworthy. He's not a hired hand. It's not just a job. He can be trusted. He is the Good Shepherd, and he can be trusted. Number two, Jesus says, "I know my own and they know me, just as the Father knows me and I know the Father." Jesus is saying that as a good shepherd, he calls us into intimacy with him, to know him in an intimate way, and to know that we are known by him in an intimate way, akin to the relationship he has with the Father. I mean, just think about that for a second. That's actually a remarkable thing for Jesus to say. And so today we grapple with the fact that we are called into this intimacy with Jesus, the same intimacy that he shares with the Father. And thirdly, we hear that Jesus lays down his life for his sheep. He lays down his life for his sheep. St. Paul says that he lives a life of faith in the Son of God. He said, "I live a life of faith in the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me." It's not just that Jesus laid down his life for all humanity or all people. It's that personal. He loved me and gave his life for me. And an essential part of knowing Jesus as the Good Shepherd is accepting that truth. We've seen images of the Good Shepherd in the opening slide, the theme slide today. We saw a picture that's very common, Jesus with a sheep around his shoulders. It's one of the earliest Christian symbols of Jesus. And, well, I've always kind of smiled ever since I made a trip to the Highlands of Scotland about 10 years ago. Many of you know I'm originally from Scotland. I like to insert that into my homilies. And I got up and close with a lot of sheep. And one thing I noticed about sheep is that they're not white and fluffy. They're actually half white and half brown and very stinky and filthy. And seeing sheep up close and their lack of hygiene, I thought the last thing I would ever do is put one of those things around my shoulders. Like, no way. So forget that fluffy sheep thing. And in light of the fact that Jesus says the Good Shepherd lays down his life, I think the most potent sign of Jesus, or symbol of Jesus the Good Shepherd, is not so much Jesus with a sheep around his neck as it is Jesus on the cross, the sign of the cross. Last night, Father Rob we had a conversation. He said, well, I can send you some of the points that I was praying with and the Lord was saying to me. And I said, sure, send me them and I'll use some of them and I'll refer to some of them. And that way, if my homily is really bad, I can just blame you. Simple as that. Very convenient. So Father Rob sent me a few thoughts, and as usual, very profound. And I want to share with you some of the words that Father Rob wrote in reflection about the Good Shepherd. He said that this week, he said, quote, I heard the voice of the Good Shepherd in a very surprising way on Friday, just 2 days ago. Some months ago, Father James asked me to speak over Zoom at a Divine Renovation conference that was being held in Germany. Now, Divine Renovation is a ministry that I and others founded about 4 years ago to help churches around the world become missionary. And we were hosting a virtual conference for German-speaking nations in Europe. Father Rob continues, there were over 1,500 participants at the conference, bishops, priests, deacons, and lay leaders. And I led a small workshop on the topic of lessons learned in my first year as a priest in a parish that is on the missionary journey. I teased out 6 lessons that have been areas of substantial learning for me. Then the participants were given an opportunity to ask me questions. I was deeply moved by the tenor of the questions. These questions came from a place of deep care and concern for the church. Genuine, gentle, kind men and women who know the voice of our Lord and his merciful love for all of us. They seem to know in an intimate way the joy that comes from knowing the truth, beauty, and goodness of Jesus that cannot be reduced to simplistic categories of ideological certainty. I am left wondering if the opposite of faith is not actually doubt, but that of an ideological certainty void of grace. And Father Rob concludes this. What I experienced in that group was not the hubris of certainty, but the beauty and goodness of a deeply abiding intimacy of knowing Jesus as the Good Shepherd. There is an unshakable knowing in this that isn't compatible with ideological certainty and all the ideological nonsense of today's public discourse. Now, good Father Rob stuff here. So, back to the less profound Father James. One thing that struck me about Father Rob's reflection is that this experiencing the Good Shepherd in the small group, it was a lot of priests in his small group. And one of the things that the church asks us to do on this Good Shepherd Sunday is reflect on the vocation to priesthood, which is essential to our church. Many of you have heard me say before, it's no coincidence that my title is pastor. And pastor is simply the Latin word for shepherd. I'm your shepherd. It's been a difficult few decades for the image of the priesthood in the church, as we all know. But one thing I've discovered through my work with Divine Renovation Ministry over the years, and I've been blessed to encounter literally thousands of amazing and caring priests all over the world. Priests who, like the Good Shepherd, can be trusted. They're good. They're not simply hired hands. They're not simply doing a job. Number 2, they desire to see their flock drawn into an intimate relationship with Jesus, the relationship that Jesus describes in the gospel. And thirdly, they're willing to joyfully lay down their lives for their flock, just like the Good Shepherd. Yes, they're joyful and willing. And I have to tell you that over the years as a priest, I'm coming up to 24 years ordained. I got special permission to be ordained at the age of 14, by the way, by the Pope. In case you're wondering, you can do the math. I'll have to go to confession afterwards now. But, over the years, I've experienced this. I've encountered people, it's sometimes humorous, where people approach me with sympathy because I'm a priest, as if they somehow believe that underneath it all, I'm actually miserable and lonely. We all have moments where we could be miserable and lonely, but that's not been my experience. It's not been my experience as a priest. It's been a blast. Yeah, every Christian vocation has the cross. I remember years ago, it was actually a woman in this parish about 15, 16 years ago. I was by her bedside. It was through a connection with a friend, and she was dying. And he asked me to come and anoint her. I remember I was in the room with her holding her hand pre-COVID, and we were having a conversation, and she said to me, "You've chosen a difficult life." And I said, "Yes, I have." And I said, "But was your life easy?" I think if I recall, she had raised like 8 kids, and she just smiled. Of course, her life wasn't easy. No life is easy. Every vocation involves the cross. But you know, over the years, most of the priests that I've been blessed to meet are deeply happy and fulfilled in their vocation. So please, I don't need your sympathy because I'm a priest. Most of us are happy and fulfilled. Now, I want to go back to Rob's story because he talked about experiencing this character of the Good Shepherd from the people in a small group, but they were priests and lay leaders. And this tells us something very important, that it's not just up to the priests to create the face of the Good Shepherd within the church. We must become a parish that reflects the face of the Good Shepherd. We must become a parish built on a web of trusting relationships. Trust. Number 2, we must become a parish in which we help one another to experience the intimacy with God that Jesus speaks about in the gospel today. And thirdly, to become a parish in which all members care for one another. Because if it's just up to the priest to care for parishioners, it's not going to work. I'm going to be run off my feet and doing nothing else. And the overall level of care in this parish is going to be pretty darn low because there's only one of me and only 24 hours a day. We need to become a parish that cares for one another. And that caring can begin now. It can begin now as we patiently endure the limitations and inconvenience of this lockdown. And we do the best that we can to limit the spread of this virus. It can begin now when each of us, reach out to our neighbors. People who might be living alone. People might be lonely. Check in with them. See how they're doing. See how we can help. It can begin now when we intentionally reach out to another member of our parish. Perhaps a member of our parish who is not online, who's not able to be connected with what we're doing this morning. I want to close with the words of Father Rob from his notes that he sent to me. He said this about this church that reflects the face of the Good Shepherd. "I sure would like to serve in a parish like that," he says. "Let's do it together. With the help of God we can." And to that, Father Rob, I say amen. May it be so, and may that kind of parish no longer be a strange thing. Amen.